Good morning, everyone, and good morning to Famida.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, everyone. How exciting to have you connect to our INN8 webinar today. And a lot of you would have heard about INN8, our new platform. You would have heard about our end-to-end investment strategy and our journey to a digitized and much more efficient way of working. And it's really an honor and a privilege to be here today talking to you about our INN8 platform and talking to you about our upcoming move into INN8 as the portfolio, as the platform of choice. Sorry, just came back from the vocab is lost, as our platform of choice going forward. And we've got Mike today, and Mike is the platform opposition head. He also owns a lot of the operations and servicing across the platform and will be best placed to take us through exactly what INN8 the platform is, why we're going the route of INN8, why we think this is the best choice for us. We're also first to market, so we're really excited about that. And more importantly, how this is going to make your lives as advisors easier. It's been a bit of a journey, and you've walked that journey with us, and we'd like to thank you. And we also want to thank you in advance for the upcoming move of the assets onto the INN8 platform. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Mike, who's going to take you through the platform pieces and also just take you through what you can expect in the next while. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Famida. And as always, it feels a bit like Groundhog Day. We've done a few of these now this year, and it's really exciting because we've certainly, I think, the team has nailed down the process, and we're approaching tranche 2, which is happening in September, for a smaller cohort of Liberty advisors, and they've been on the journey now for some months. But today's webinar is really looking forward to next year, March, when we're going to have the third tranche of Elevate. And so before we get too stuck into the detail, I just want to zoom out a little bit and just talk a little bit about some of the background that you alluded to there, Famida. So as you all know, the group invested into a new investment platform, and that began several years ago. And we've steadily scaled that up and made it ready for launch, and it's been out in the market for a few years now. And many of you and your colleagues have done the accreditation and the training and are steadily onboarding yourselves into that platform. And I guess the strategic imperative behind this is that while the standard platform has served us well over the years, technology does age. And every 20 to 30 years or so, you need to reinvest and uplift that technology. We have to respond to new challenges in the market. We have to make ourselves ready for the future, adopt digital, and certainly look at new ways of doing business and serving our clients. And so that's really where the fundamentals of the platform came from. And if we look back to May this year, May was when the first tranche of a very small cohort of Liberty advisors and their clients successfully we moved their client balances and their data from standard platform onto the INN8 investment platform. And that was also well communicated, and all clients landed quite happily there. And so what we're going to be doing today is talking through some of the specifics relating to Elevate, what products are in scope and what are the fees and what do I need to do as an advisor. It's really sort of an orientation session. And I think the first thing to think about is don't panic. We've got 6 months to prepare here. The go live date for tranche 3 is going to be sometime in the middle of March 2026. And so this is really an introductory session to land some of these platform concepts and also talk through some of the specifics, some of the communications. We've adopted some best practice when it comes to comms. We're going to talk a bit about the fees a bit later, and then also what we're hoping to engage with you and your clients around, trying to make it as little effort as possible, but to make sure that they know what to expect once they land in the INN8 investment platform. So yeah, that's sort of an introduction from my side, Famida.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, it's a lot of information for some of the newer guys. And if you haven't been introduced to INN8, or if you haven't worked on the platform yet, maybe just take us through when you say elevate, what does that mean? And what can advisors expect as a future way of working going forward?
Absolutely. So I think I went to see the regulator a few months back to make sure that they were comfortable with what we are doing here. And certainly from a regulatory and legal entity perspective, sometimes when you mention the word migration, it tends to set hairs running and people get a bit uncomfortable. And when we talk about migrations, it typically means a change in legal entities or maybe uh, a change in fees or a change in terms and conditions. And certainly none of that is happening here when we elevate to INN8. As most of you know, the existing open products on Stanlib are essentially mirrored on INN8. So the classic investment plan is the same as the investment account. It's the same three standalone retirement funds. We've got one or two new products like the endowment at INN8, but effectively all the open products at Stanlib Lisp, the same legal entities, all apply within the INN8 environment. And so, for many reasons, this is not really a true migration in the sense of the word. It's the same Stanlib Wealth Management licensed entity that carries the Cat3 license, and that's the same entity that supports the INN8 platform. It's the same living annuity license from Liberty Group Limited that we use on both platforms. And so when it comes to talk about this change and transition for clients, we've decided to call it Elevate because essentially none of their terms and conditions are changing. They have the same fee structures moving from one platform to the next. And what we're really doing is we're taking their data and we're moving it to a new backend system. And we're taking all of their assets, which are currently sitting in a bulk account at Stanlib Wealth Management, and moving them to a different bulk account also within Stanlib Wealth Management. And so they start to show up in the new platform. And so that's why we called it Elevate rather than a migration. And the regulator was quite happy when we went to see them. They were comfortable with our governance structures. And so we got the green light with them to go ahead with this change.
This sounds like a really exciting step. You've been working on this, Mike, I know personally now for many, many years. And I don't want to shift gears too much because, from what I understand, you're saying it's going to be a seamless transition out of a system that has potentially aged and had its time into a new age platform that even the regulators are supportive of and happy with. And there'll be a little bit of a lift and shift. And the technology is going to change, and the technology is going to change for the better. Just one or two or three points on why you think this is so fantastic and why we should all be so excited about this change.
100%. So I think for me, it's all about the advisor's experience and the client experience when it comes to managing their investments. And if you think about the rise of the internet and everything is at our fingertips. I mean, you've got Apple Plus and you've got Netflix and you've got your banking at your fingertips. Why can't you have your investments at your fingertips? And so while we want the advisor to remain in the driver's seat of all of those investment interactions, clients are demanding more and more transparency and access to their information. And so when you have a really digital ready platform, you can respond to all of these increasing client demands. Um, also think that having your data ready for digital allows you to build out these really interesting propositions down the line, whether that be artificial intelligence or providing really insightful data and metrics on your client interactions. All of this becomes possible once you're in a future ready platform. And something as simple as two parts, responding to regulatory change also becomes increasingly difficult when you haven't invested in your back end technology and it's getting sort of really old and staid. And so we never know what the future might hold. So certainly from a regulatory perspective, we want to help advisors remain compliant as possible. And so, changing to a digital ready investment platform makes a lot of sense.
Mark, I heard, I obviously don't use the platform personally, but I've been through a number of demos. One of the things that really excited me was something as simple as a switch can be done through a press of a button. Something, like a withdrawal can be done through a press of a button. So once you've got all of your requirements, you press a button and it's kind of done in the back end. And that takes away a lot of human intervention. It takes away a lot of opportunity for error. And it just gives our advisors and our clients a lot more peace of mind, but also it gives us a ton of efficiency as we drive for our advisors to want to spend a lot more time with their clients advising and a lot less time on admin. Is this a little bit exaggerated or is it true? How do you find the efficiencies and how do you think that's worked for some of our advisors in the independent channels and some of our advisors potentially in the other parts of LAP that have already started using INN8?
Mm.
What kind of feedback are you getting?
Yeah. So many advisors, when they first start to use the platform, it's a little bit like driving a new car. Maybe you don't know how to drive a manual, or you get into maybe a new building and you have to navigate to find the loos and find your office. Um, the first time you do it, it might take a little bit longer than you would. But we actually sat down with some advisors and we timed them with the timepiece. And the first few sort of new business deals or switches or whatever transaction you're trying to process, let's say it typically takes 7 or 8 minutes. Some of our really proficient users are bringing those transaction times down to sort of a minute and 30 seconds or 2 minutes. And so they are really nice sort of unnecessary work that you're doing elsewhere today, which you can actually cut out and bring those efficiencies and rather spend more time on your clients. I think a couple principles which we've built into INN8, like not wanting to rekey information all the time. Once you've onboarded client, you can really easily add new accounts into that client profile. And so, and without needing them to go and approve stuff again and sign lots of pieces of paper, you can simply add another account to their name. And so there's a really nice efficiency gain there for advisors. And then the servicing aspect is really great as well. So whether that's sort of simple stuff like Section 14 fee renewals or processing your annual living annuity income review, it's sort of all there on the calendar and you can track it quite nicely. So obviously we can always improve and make things even better, but there's a whole lot of all these little efficiencies through your practice which you can hopefully unlock.
And we've got a bit of a shy audience, and I want to encourage our listeners today to please ask any question you'd like, absolutely any question. In 6 months' time, we're not going to have the stand-up lisp any longer. We are going to be on INN8. And today you have the best audience possible. You've got Mike himself that can answer any question you'd like on the platform, and he probably has the most thorough understanding end to end of what INN8 is. So please ask the questions. Um, Unfortunately, we don't have a prize for the most questions, but maybe we can think up something if you're really brave enough to want to ask whatever questions you want to ask. We're excited to partner with you on this journey. And so we're here today to ensure that whatever it is that's probably bothering you or concerning you, maybe you're not brave enough to ask it on the chat. You can even send us a private message. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. So, Mike, moving on to the practicalities of what our advisors can expect and what the critical next steps are. I know one of the things we've been pushing really, really hard on our side is to ensure that our advisors get the necessary training, they get the necessary accreditation, and they get onboarded onto INN8 and they start trying a little case or two. Because, like you said, the first time, and audience, you're going to know my age now, but I was really in love with my BlackBerry. I might have been the last person in my family to get rid of my BlackBerry. I did my emails on there. I had BBMs. It just worked. And so the first time I got this little iPhone with that little button at the bottom, and then I had to type with my thumbs, it was really odd. And I had to learn the operating system and I had to learn, this whole Apple ecosystem. But then once I got used to the Apple ecosystem, boy, oh boy, did I understand why I needed to convert. Because now I could actually control some household appliances. I could control my iPad. I could control my computer. Life was just better. But that change took a little bit of pain. Talk us through that, Mike. Tell us why you think it's so important for our advisors to actually get on and start experiencing the platform sooner rather than later. And practically, what would you suggest as the next steps? And then
Yeah,
once you're done with that, I've got some questions on the chat. I've got some brave people that have asked questions, and then I'll
brilliant.
maybe read you those questions. Thanks.
Okay, so I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the iPhone because many of us change phones from time to time. And certainly when I first sort of went from my iPhone 1 to my iPhone 2, it was a bit clunky and I had to plug wires in and do a backup and there was all this stuff. Now, I mean, I got a new phone 2 weeks ago. You sort of put them next to each other, and then within a few minutes, your new phone's up and running. It's all the apps and all your information's there. And I think that's what Elevate really aspires to feel like in that on the Thursday or Friday evening, the weekend before Elevate in March, clients will go to sleep and all their balances will be on StandLab Online. And then on the Monday, Tuesday, clients will wake up, will activate their accounts and the advisor and client will be able to log in and see their balances with all their information on the INN8 platform. And that's how sort of smooth and easy and seamless it's been designed to be. And certainly, if we can talk through tranche one, which I think was a great success, um, actually the hard work is in the change management. And so we've done three communications with increasing levels of detail, and we also send those comms out in a very structured way. So we want to make sure the first principle is that advisors get communicated to first, and only later do we go to clients. And so we do that three times in the months leading up to March next year. And we did the same for the May tranche this year, and we did the same for September, and we'll do again for March. And so the first one sort of introduces the change. The second one talks a bit about the benefits of INN8, and the third communication actually gives a 30-day notice period to clients. All the way along, there's some really useful documents which we call frequently asked questions, and all of our people, both at the StandLab call center and the INN8 service center, have been trained on this process, and they're really battle hardened by now because, as you can imagine, we've been through quite a lot of test runs as well. And so, any question that you have, you can certainly fire it off, whether that's to your StandLab relationship or to INN8, and we're happy to answer it. But essentially, from a client and advisor perspective, we're hoping that you don't have to lift too many fingers. The onus on advisors, the effort that we're asking for you, is to get on board and get accredited to INN8 so that when your clients land in INN8, you know where to go and find them at least and how to service them if they want to do a withdrawal or a switch, etc. From a client perspective, we don't need clients to sign any documents. You're not going to have to sign any forms as part of the Elevate process. What we are doing is for a few years now, we've been cleaning up our data. And so perhaps somebody's email address bounced on a com we sent them a while back. We are reaching out to advisors to ask for updated details. We have several other ways to update details. We've got connections with our group partners. We can go look at some of our old app forms, but from time to time, we may need to reach out to advisors to confirm certain client details. Maybe a tax number failed validation, or maybe the bank account is not valid anymore, something along those lines. There's a little bit of a data cleanup that's happening, and we're not going to do that during challenge, I promise you that. But certainly in the months leading up to March, we'll be reaching out to ask just for a little bit of help to clean up our data.
Absolutely. Mike, it sounds like we've got a very receptive audience.
Okay,
Leanne,
brilliant.
I hope you have something, anything for the person that asks the most questions. Mike, I see you smiling nervously. But we've got 11 questions, and I'm going to, and really good questions. So thank you, audience, and thank you for engaging. So let's start with the first question. It says, "Good morning. We have this digital capability to have innate requirements verified and authorized digitally through the platform, which is really easy to do. Compliance still has to be completed via either digital and or manual processes. Will the INN8 platform include compliance requirements going forward in order to eliminate the need for advisors having to sign such documents either in person or through other e-signing platforms?" And I think that's a really good question because that talks about the Cat 1 requirements. And it certainly talks about our phase one integration into Salesforce, but potentially how we're going to mature that going forward. But Mike, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, so I think the platform's certainly been designed to work in the way that advisors work. And we've provided a couple of key documents to support your advice process. The first document is obviously the quote, or we call it the investment proposal, and that supports your conversation with your client while you sort of in the act of giving advice. You may look at
Mm,
various options and the quote, and you can do multiple versions of that quote. That supports the sort of process of giving advice.
mm,
And then once client decides to go ahead with that, we also have something which we call an instruction summary. And that's effectively, you can think of it like a pre-populated form. It uses all your existing client details, and it's a summary of all the detail of that transaction, which is available before you actually submit that. And that goes along with the quote and your advice documents as part of your compliance process. And then you upload whatever is required from you to the portal, and then we process that on our side. There are some controls, certainly for some um, uh, advice firms, where we check certain documents back and forth. But from an e-signature perspective, the INN8 platform doesn't require e-signatures as such, but those may still form part of your advice process. So there are certain documents that you do need to keep on record, and we're hoping that you use our quotes and our instruction summary to support that advice process.
absolutely. And we are aware that you've got to vault your compliance requirements from an advice process through a vaulting process manually at the moment. Absolutely. One of our intentions is to integrate into the Salesforce environment and then work through the Advice Plus tool and guided implementation to automate that going forward. And that way, you'll have the best of both worlds. And currently, if you're using the Workbench process and if you're using the Advice Plus system, you're able to use guided implementation into INN8. So we have done phase one, but phase two, as it relates to your CAT 1 advice compliance requirements, is also on our roadmap, and that is coming pretty quickly and pretty soon. But I say that obviously will be within the next year. And so for now, if you can get familiar with Advice Plus Workbench as well as INN8, that would be ideally what we'd like you to do going forward. And so I hope, Jan, I've answered your question, but if I haven't, please feel free to write back and let us know what part of the compliance processes and the advice processes we've missed. And thank you, Mike. I think the proposal stage is critical to the ROA, and making sure that you've got those documents and you've got those documents stored, even if it isn't stored ideally in one place, is absolutely critical. And the thing I love about INN8 is that all of that data still sits inside of our data store, which is amazing. So you can still pull it out of the INN8 base anytime you'd like. Great. The next question is, good morning. Is there a way to do dummy quotes so that we can get used to the system?
Shall I take that one?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, Victor, thanks for the question. The investment proposals are certainly there to support your client conversation, and there's very low risk in creating multiple versions of the quotes. Creating a quote does not necessarily submit new business, and so you can create multiple quotes. Uh, the way to submit a new business instruction is actually only at the end of that process, and you can go back and edit details and then create a different quote if a client wants to see a different portfolio, or you want to change your fees or whatever. That functionality is there on the system, and only once you submit the business will the final version of your quote get attached to the client account. And you can always go back and delete those sort of draft quotes if they're sort of clogging up your instruction tracker. So yeah, that's all ready for you there, Victor. From a
Great.
fees perspective, I see, Famida, there's a fees question here. Shall we just
Yes.
talk a bit about fees, and also in particular
Yes.
how they're going to relate to Elevate? Because how Stanlib does administration and advice fees may not be exactly the same as INN8, although the fee structures from an admin perspective are exactly the same. So firstly, for an Elevate perspective, we're going to move clients from Stanlib to INN8, and their fees are going to stay exactly the same. So the fee tiers, the minimum rand fee, everything is exactly the same as Stanlib List. The only difference on INN8 is that you get a few more options for aggregation. So INN8 does ID level aggregation automatically. So we add up all of your accounts, your RA or TIFSA, and you benefit from that aggregation. Whereas at Stanlib, that's not happening automatically today. Further, we also aggregate any offshore balances you might have with INN8 Offshore or SBI, which recently launched. And so you can get your sort of aggregation number up by bringing in any offshore, and we do that automatically. You don't need to ask us to do it. And then the last thing is quite a nice family aggregation benefit on INN8, where you can take the mom and the dad and their minor kids and their family trust, and you can put them together. We link them on the system, and they get a slightly lower effective fee rate. Um, and then just coming to the corporate or company investment, I think it's worth investigating the family aggregation aspect for that. We don't currently run sort of special fees uh, sort of on an ad hoc basis. But what I can tell you is that there may be a number of legacy special fees at Standard Lisp. We closed those down a few years back when we changed the fees, the pricing. But if you are on a special fee at Standard Lisp, we will bring you across and honor that fee into perpetuity. Another good example is the tax-free savings account, Famida. The tax-free savings account at Standard Lisp is a flat 20 basis points. We're going to bring you across at the flat 20 basis points, and you won't be paying
Lovely.
any more fees on your legacy Standard Lisp TIFSA.
And what I've said to Sorrel as well is if it's a mega deal, say we're talking 5 billion, that he is welcome to contact you, Mike. And those we can look, we can look at on a once-off basis. But audience, it's got to be a mega big deal. The aggregation is actually really cool. Thank you, Mike. Every time I listen to you, I learn more. And it does make us really competitive in the market. Certainly, I've looked at the fees again relative to some of the bigger players, and I promise you, audience, try it. We are actually competitive on many, many scales. Sevenati Boy has got a question around a client that couldn't access the platform from South Korea. Um, and Mike, I think this is two-pronged. I think one part will obviously be the technical aspects, which I might ask you for help on. But the other aspect, Sevenati, will be whether or not, from a phase perspective, we allowed to advise clients that are not based in South Africa. And maybe if I could go with the first part, Sevenati, if the client is a South African client, and if the client is a South African citizen and a South African tax resident, absolutely, we should be able to do business with the client. Please be wary. If the client is based in South Korea and is no longer a citizen or no longer a tax resident, we might have some issues around what phase can and cannot allow you to do. But certainly on the technical aspects, Mike, maybe you can help with the web access issue.
Yeah. So what we've found sometimes is and I'll use the Liberty Wi-Fi at Braamfontein as an example. We had to go and add the innate.co.za domain to the whitelist so that employees could access the innate website. And so that's probably something that's happening in South Korea. Perhaps they think that the web provider thinks that innate is perhaps not safe, and the client can get around that by using a VPN. But certainly, if you maybe send us their details, we can get hold of them and see how to unlock that. I'm just want to handle Mzondi's question because it's actually a really good one. Why would the client use an advisor after the introduction of this platform? This platform is only for intermediated clients. So clients get a read-only login where they can see their investments, but they are not able to transact on them because that's actually your and your office's job. It's your job to help your clients not make any silly decisions and do a withdrawal when the market has dropped 20%. And so I think this actually fits into the way that you do business because while clients can see their information, you're actually in control of all the instructions that get processed on the platform. And so I think it's a really nice value add for advisor is because we won't actually accept any client instructions. Well, they can't make any changes to their investments. It's only for the advisor.
Thanks, Mike. The next question is from Christina. She'd like to know how she can keep track of her lump sum investments where a client is debited. She says she hasn't been able to locate where the progress is showing. So in other words, when was the client actually debited? Was the debit successful? How long until the policy documents, etc., are released to the client and the advisor after loading the client? Maybe you can give us some help there.
Yeah. So we've found that with brand new clients, there's usually a little bit of a lag, 1 to 3 to 4 days when client needs to be vetted. Maybe they need to click an activation link. But certainly from a debiting perspective, we've invested into our instructions tracker, which many of you would be familiar with the StanLib track and trace functionality. We have something similar called instruction tracker, but it tracks a whole universe of instructions, not just new business or switches, annuity income changes, etc. And so you can actually see the status of each of those transactions, whether it's been submitted, whether it's been processed, if it's been priced or completed. And so I think that's the first point of call, is to have a look at your instructions tracker. You can easily search for the client there and make sure you're tracking the right one. But if you think that something's gone wrong, feel free to get in touch with us, and our service and ops people will track down. They'll be able to tell you exactly which day the debit is about to go forward. What I've noticed with advisors who've done a lot of business on the platform is they sort of get used to the cadence of, submit an instruction today, it gets processed, and then tomorrow or the next day, the bank is debited. Sometimes maybe the client account's bank details are not valid, and so we need to reach out and remediate that. There's often something that comes up, but that's why we have ops and service folks there. So, and the last thing, just about when policy documents are released to the client, we don't email PDFs to client. There's no more sort of emailing POPI sensitive information around. If there is a document for client attention, then we typically send an email reminding them that something's available, and then they can log into their secure documents folder on the INN8 website and have a look at their quotes, their statements, their tax certificates, their instruction confirmations. Everything's available within their secure documents folder. And advisor can see all of those documents as well.
And of course, our advisors can certainly access their regional business development managers if they may require a little bit of a refresher, or if they require any kind of assistance as it relates to getting familiar with the system. You do also have support from the BDMs across the regions. I've got another question here as it relates to reporting on investments. It's an anonymous question, and it says, I noticed that the gross investment amount is shown, then the fees and the 2% cash portion is deducted. It shows as a negative return on ROR.
Yeah, interesting one. So thanks, Anonymous. We've certainly invested into our reporting capabilities, and it's always helpful to go into the specific example. So perhaps you could just get in contact with us, and we can investigate each of those sort of individuals. It's worth looking at the cash flows just to make sure we're calculating it correctly. Yeah, so maybe that's just a better way to solve that one.
Great. And a nice practical question here from Robert. What can you expect as an, from kind of the interim kind of time frame between when you're actually closed off standard and the assets are now elevating onto INN8?
Yeah. So that's a great topic to touch on, Famida, and it speaks to sort of the shape of the Elevate tranches we've had this year, which has, I guess, been on an eligibility measure. So, for example, if there was a client inside of an advisor's relationship who qualified, and when I say qualified, I meant like their data's in order, they're in scope for the tranche, and they were communicated to, then they would have formed part of tranche one or tranche two this year. There was a chance that they may have fallen out. For example, if there was a work in progress, maybe they processed a switch or tried to do a withdrawal in the days leading up to that tranche, then they might have fallen out of that tranche. But looking forward to March next year, it really is we're trying to capture all clients as possible. And so in the lead up to March next year, we will close StanLib to new business, likely during December 2025. For existing clients, if you have an RA or a TIFSA, we'll let you process any top-ups you want to during January for your February tax year end. But then what we're hoping to do is from January, you process all of your new client business, for example, Section 14 transfers, etc., onto INN8. And that way, we're going to reduce and keep to a minimum as much of the work in progress as possible. So if you can think about existing clients topping up through to the end of January, and then the data is stable and we move you in March. But actually from the end of December, no more new clients at StanLib Lisp process all of your new clients on Innate. So hopefully
Well,
that
actually,
answers the question.
thank you. And I mean, if I just want to push the envelope a little bit, it would be nice if all new cases come onto Innate today. I think waiting until December might be too late, audience.
Absolutely.
It's just going to make your lives really, really difficult, particularly if you're using the list for new business or even if you're servicing your existing clients. Prudence seems to have had a little bit of a snafu. She says she's done her accreditation, she's waiting to be onboarded. How long does this normally take? Um, Mike, maybe that's something Prudence can reach out to the team for and we can allocate somebody to help her if that's okay.
Absolutely. So let's just talk about the process because there is a little bit of a change to doing and adopting the way of doing business on Innate. And so our process is that you spend some time with onboarding, that when you get that first or second or third case and you need some help, you actually have a Teams meeting with them. They walk you through the process. And so you feel comfortable when you're clicking the buttons. And then once you feel comfortable, then there's a nice warm handover to the service model where, the 0860 number and the Hello 8 service center. Plus, I'm also conscious within Liberty, we have certain hubs supporting different types of advice firms. And so, depending on your service model, it's also important to sort of get accustomed to how that's going to work going forward. And so, but yes, we'll make sure we reach out to Prudence after this one.
Great. Mike, where can this audience find, that very, very um, succinctly and comprehensive one pager that we put together with Leanne and the team on the support matrix? It would be great if we could get the team to maybe, send it as an added extra to the guys, or maybe they can get it on the net portal, but it would be nice if they could look at all of the different areas that they can connect with if they're stuck with any, in
Yeah.
any step of the process.
So I guess maybe I must just apologize in advance. You're going to be receiving lots of communications from us,
Yes.
and I'm sorry for that. But because this is quite a big change, it's a protracted period of time between now and March. We're going to be sending not just the sort of formal emails. There will also be a number of sort of mailers which round up all the information that you need, whether that's links to the FAQs or the service promise matrix or a number of other pieces of collateral which support you taking the Innate proposition to market. Those links are going to be contained in a number of different emails over the course of the next few months. So please do look out for those. There will also be recordings available for and live events called masterclasses. And this is where you can, if you've done your onboarding and accreditation, maybe you've done one or two cases, but you just need like a refresher to go over and make sure that you're comfortable with Innate. Those masterclasses will also be available to you, and the links will be in those emails. So do look out for those. We're going to be supporting you with as much collateral as possible. I promise you by March next year, you'll be so sick of seeing me. So um, look out for those.
Thank you. Thank you. Christina asked a question around whether you could load phase documents on Innate, and I did answer, and I did say that there is a requirement to load and to ensure that the phase vaulting requirements are still met, and you can't do that on Innate at the moment. That will come once we have completed all of our phases of integration into the Workbench environment, and hopefully that's automated and seamless. But for now, Christina and audience, you are going to have to ensure that you are vaulting into the phase vault because, that is a separate requirement from an advice perspective. And I think, Mike, you've actually answered Sivanati's question around, he says it's still a little bit hard to navigate the website. He still needs some back office support. And you spoke about the beauty of having your onboarding specialists. You spoke about the master classes, and you also spoke about all of the communication that we'll be sending our advisors' way. Is there anything else that I might have missed for Sivanati?
I think that's a comprehensive response, and I think just from a capacity perspective, while we're effectively running two platforms at the moment, but we're steadily retraining all of the standard Lisp personnel, and we've also forecast the sort of volumes of calls and emails over the next 6 months and this year for that matter. And so we're steadily increasing the capacity within the Innate service areas. I know we had a really busy July month, 790, so I'm sorry if we seem to have disappointed you. But for example, 8 extra people are coming on stream 1st of September. So we are definitely gearing up to support all of this extra volume And certainly by March next year, we'll have a full platform complement at the same level that Stand-up Lisp has today.
And Natasha's got a question. She says, do you have a data capture form or client instruction form available on INN8 to capture client instructions to take up a new business investment or servicing request? I would imagine this is for new business and servicing, and it might be inferred that this will, potentially talk about maybe something like downloading the PDF as opposed to actually doing it live, because you can do that on the system live, Mike. I mean, you wouldn't need to download anything. But I'm aware of something that is downloadable and printable. Maybe you can talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, this isn't really an innate form as such, but certainly there is a basic data capture form available just to help you make sure you get as much information as possible from your client. We don't want to go back and forth between clients. You want to make sure when you have the meeting, you get as much information as possible. And certainly that's also there to support your advice process. So we can make that so data capture form available.
Thank you, Mike. And the next one is, why didn't we keep the Stand-up brand? And why did we move to INN8, given that Stand-up has also got quite a large brand equity in the market? And certainly, audience, we're not suggesting that Stand-up doesn't have huge brand equity in the market. But Mike, you are very familiar with this question, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Famida. So certainly from a specialization perspective, the group supports a number of different initiatives, particularly around businesses and businesses sort of owning their voice in the market. And Stand-up has been on a journey of specialization for a number of years. In fact, the Stand-up asset management brand will remain around for many years to come. It's well trusted, but importantly, it's an investment management brand. And so our voice as the platform tended to get a bit lost in that space. And so from that perspective, we also wanted to come up with something which was a bit more modern and a bit more digital and a bit more advisor focused and advisor inspired. And so that's where INN8 comes from. And it gives the platform a voice. It shows that we're specializing towards a platform specialist expertise. And so Stand-up and INN8 will work very closely together into the future. But it's a bit like, you have the Liberty Life Company, you have the INN8 platform, and you have Stand-up. In other examples, you might have a competitor life company, and their platform is called something different as well. And so that's, I guess there's precedent in the market for it, but we also wanted to roll out something which was new and interesting and future focused. So thanks, Rahim, for that. We also recognize that there's quite a bit of support required out in the market. So you'll see there's quite a bit of PR happening from a group perspective around the platform. There's quite a bit of media and PR that we're rolling out from an INN8 perspective. And this hopefully supports some of your client conversations as you start to hear and see more about INN8 in their email inboxes. So do look out for those on business day and the likes of that.
And another important point is Stand-up is at the moment, we're trying really hard to ensure that we entrench Stand-up for their core expertise, which is asset management in the institutional space. And as a group post-integration, it was just really important for us to tidy up that architecture. When you have a brand in the market, it needs to represent something, and that something needs to be core to what that institution is doing. Stand-up, the core for, focus on Stand-up at the moment is institutional asset management. And we want to ensure that that puristic association with the brand remains. A platform brand needs to be a brand that resonates with exactly what the platform needs to do for advisors. And therefore, I think the INN8 brand has been born. It's certainly got some really great equity in the market. And if you look at the feedback just generally across anyone that's used the platform and anyone that's resonated a little bit with the brand, it's fresh, it's exciting, it's different, and it certainly complements our brand architecture. So hopefully, that helps answer the question. Do a little bit of research, Google INN8, you'll see it actually has got some significant equity now in the market. And then Ron's come back and he says, thanks, Famida, for the feedback. I was referring directly to the vaulting and additional requirements from Liberty's compliance department. If we're able to do all of this on a single platform, such as INN8, it would make the entire process so much easier, specifically for clients. 100% agree, Jan. And when we integrate into the workbench environment, it is going to be seamless. So you've got to hang 10 a little bit until we get that full integration done. And then you can have your automated requirements from compliance done and dusted while you're going through the transaction. And that is certainly part of our roadmap. You agree, Mark?
Absolutely. So we've already done that first phase of integration. So you can start in Advisor Workbench and process your client and then finish the rest of the instruction on the INN8 platform. Many of those data points are pulled through automatically, so you're not having to rekey information. At the same time, we do have some data feeds going back to Liberty, kicking off various processes like compliance vaulting, etc. And absolutely, we can make it more seamless and even easier to use. But that work has progressed really nicely over the last 18 months.
And Peter's wanting to know when you can expect the tax-free savings accounts transfers into INN8. And I imagine that would obviously practically come down to whether the clients are in T2 or T3. But Mike, I'll hand that over to you.
Yeah. So just remember that uh, tax-free savings account transfers are in scope for tranche 2 and for tranche 3. So if your client is on LISP today and they're part of a tranche, certainly for tranche 3, they will be, their TIFSA will come across automatically. You won't have to do anything for that. I think Peter's referring to individual one-for-one transfers in, and particularly we want you to go and gather up all of your client assets around the market and bring them to INN8. And that tax-free savings account transfer in is a very important feature that we are busy building. As you can imagine, this year has been very busy with the Elevate tranches 1 and 2. And so we've only got a few windows to production. The next one of that is in November and then again in January. And we're currently penciling in tax-free savings account transfers for January. So that's hopefully Peter can hold me to that one. But as you can imagine, there's lots of work sort of aiming to be released during those months, and certainly TIFSA transfers in is one of my favorites. So watch this space.
Savanatia says that his client is a tax resident as well as a SA citizen, but the client only resides in Korea. So maybe Mike, the technical team, can help Savanati with access.
Yeah, great.
Great. And then the next question is, when Elevate takes place, will a portion of the funds be allocated to the cash account?
Okay, that's a great
question.
So there's two aspects to that. The one is there any CGT implications for my client when they move from Standard LISP to INN8? And the answer is no. It's a unit transfer. So clients will stay in the same funds that they're on at StanLib when they move to INN8. And they're technically not out the market at all. So we're not selling anything. We are just moving your units from one account to the next. As many of you know, INN8 operates using a 2% cash allocation. But for the elevated clients, we're going to be setting all of their cash PCAs to 0%. And that's specifically for those clients who maybe you've got a large balance and you don't want to sell 2% down in a discretionary account and trigger any unnecessary CGT. So we set everyone's to 0%. And there is a feature coming Q1 next year where advisors are going to be able to customize a cash PCA percentage at a client level. And so, in advance of that feature, we're loading all of our Elevate clients at a 0% cash PCA. So it effectively behaves in exactly the same way that Standard List does today, goes and sells a few assets in the market to pay those fees. All of that detail goes through the cash PCA account, but effectively it gets held at 0. So hopefully that answers anonymous attendee's question for that. I did see a clap of hands there.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And then Padmini has got a question. She says, talk to us about products and minimum amounts in terms of monthly or lump sum investments in RAs.
Okay.
I know a lot of this is covered in the training and accreditation, but maybe take us through that, Mike.
Yeah, it's fairly, I guess, easy. You don't need to remember any product minimums because there are none. You can have a relatively small monthly debit order, and there's no minimum in lump sum. So, but what there is a minimum monthly rand fee of 23 rand a month, roughly 276 rand per annum, and that would apply to if you just do the math using the tiered fees on balances less than 50,000, your minimum rand fee is applicable. And so if you put in a 25,000 rand lump sum and a 500 rand a month debit order, then and I always say it's less than a cappuccino a month to have a full access to a full platform with all sorts of funds on it. It's a pretty good deal. Um, but if you have a really small client, starting off with 50 rand a month, it probably doesn't make sense to put them onto a fully fledged platform like INN8. But I guess that's for you, the advisor, to decide. And we've tried to make it as affordable as possible at the same time, getting each client to sort of pay their way. Um, once you
Mm,
once you have a balance above 50,000, what we've noticed is that with ID aggregation, so you could do an RA and a TIFSA, you
mm.
very quickly get to that 50,000 rand level. And so the minimum rand fees don't really affect many clients at all.
I'm going to speed through the last eight questions
Sure,
because we've been having fun, Mike. The time's gone really fast. I can't
sure.
believe it. We've
Okay.
got 10 minutes left. Jan was saying that a competitor didn't recognize the innate digital verification for a preservation fund transfer. Is there somebody that he can reach out to for help there?
Absolutely. We have certainly noticed that different providers have different requirements, and sometimes those requirements vary depending on which ops person you're speaking to from the external provider. We have relationships at the back office level with most of the sort of large providers out there, and yeah, Jan, certainly you can reach out to us if you get stuck. We're also CCing advisor on all of our follow-ups with the Section 14 transferring companies. And so he or she can see us following up with them and also follow up on his own behalf if he'd like to.
Absolutely. And Luke has got a great question. Will INN8 reduce the risk of cybercrime and are online security measures in place to monitor, control, and report any security breaches?
Mm. Yeah, I guess I think that's the benefit of and downside of going digital and being very digital is that you start to expose yourself to increasingly sophisticated fraudsters out there. I think there are a number of mitigating controls within INN8 that don't currently exist in the sort of more manual environment. And we certainly do uh, what they call penetration testing. And for those of you who are not IT boffins, that's basically a friendly external hacker, which the group pays to try and hack into our websites. And then they produce this long report, and it gets sort of escalated up, and we have to remediate any things that sort of crop up. And it's fascinating the kinds of things that they come up with. But the group we subscribe to the group policy, and certainly Standard Bank and Liberty take sort of cybercrime and information security very seriously. It, the level of work and sort of detail that the IT teams go into, I think, is excellent in this group. And certainly we can't say 100% guaranteed, but certainly from a risk posture perspective, I'm really impressed and comfortable with the level of cybercrime prevention and pen testing that we have been doing on INN8.
That is a really interesting job, and I
Yeah.
think really necessary. Tandiwe has asked for the record of advice and risk profile, and Tandiwe, we have said you've got to load your phase requirements onto the phase vault, so you can't, load that onto INN8 at the moment, but there will be a record of whatever you've done on INN8. There will be a record on the INN8 system. Kevin, he says, morning, Michael and Kamita, will INN8 access and operational efficiency require any additional technical requirements for financial advisors operating outside of South African borders?
Mm. That's interesting, Kevin. Thanks for the question. We're currently not hosting FAs outside of SA's borders. So, for example, you can't have an advice business in the UK and run South African investments on INN8. But again, maybe there's some sort of unique circumstances there, which, Kevin, I'm happy to pick it up offline and we can go through some of those.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Kevin, you've got some advisors like Corpus Claims that work from anywhere in the world, but actually he's based in South Africa. He operates from South Africa. He just chooses to work and travel. And so he might, be sitting with a client on a Teams call from Kenya, but the client is based in Cape Town, and he's operating perfectly fine on our systems. And that should be no different for Innate, right, Mike?
Correct. So I think it's about where you're licensed and where you're practicing your business. And the fact that your client travels a
Yes.
lot is sort of incidental. Actually, the place where they come home is South Africa, or they have an SA tax ID or whatever. So there are a number of different scenarios that are worth exploring. But Innate is, I guess, fundamentally for South African licensed financial advisors, albeit that we acknowledge that many of your clients are now global. And so we have done a lot of work around, how do you FICA verify these people? How do you check PEP lists and that sort of thing. So we do have some process in place to support that. But if your business is based in Lagos, then unfortunately, and you're licensed in Lagos, you can't use the N8 platform
100%.
for for
And
now.
Ben has got a really good, yeah, 100% for now. Um, Benny says, do you have a flow diagram or something that shows processes, training? What do you hand over from new business to ops? We've got a beautiful support matrix that we put together, Mike, but anything else to add there?
Yes, thanks, Ben. I think there are certainly some, particularly when it comes to new business, understanding the client onboarding, that's a useful diagram which the onboarding team can show you. And then just in terms of moving from onboarding to the full service offering, I think that's just important to understand as well. We want to hold your hand, but then let you go as soon as you're comfortable to swim on your own.
Right. And then Kavendra had a good question. Oh, sorry. Mike, I think there might be a lag either way. You're good?
Good. Yeah, yeah. Happy.
Um, I hear your voice long after I've seen your mouth move, so it might be the Wi-Fi on my side. Apologies.
Okay, sorry.
Kavendra's got a good question. Does Innate and Salesforce sync? Data does sync now. We did a lot of
Yeah,
work to make sure that the data syncs. And we've got to just enhance our phases of integration into the workbench environment in Advice Plus, which lives off the Salesforce infrastructure. And so there is still some work to be done there, but absolutely the data syncs. Michael Oliver says, when I download my client list, that will be elevated now. It's password protected. We will definitely ensure that you get all of the details that you need to access your client lists, Michael. Stuart
should
says, I
should be your ID
presume,
number, Mike.
great. And then Stuart says, I presume we don't have to use Workbench. I use at work. Stuart, that unfortunately isn't something we can decide as the platform provider, but absolutely, if you're comfortably using another advice tool, and if you're comfortable loading and vaulting your phase requirements as you would have usually done, Innate would not require anything different from an advice perspective. Prudence wants to know who she can contact at operations, and Mike, you did say hello at Innate.
Yes, absolutely. Or the 0860 number. So we'll share the service matrix after this. Look out for those emails from
Perfect.
Innate. Yeah.
Perfect. And then Prudence is saying, I'm sorry, Craig is saying, are policy documents only available digitally or are hard copies sent to them?
Okay, so we've given up on the postal system. We don't post any documents to clients any longer. And all of those policy documents are available online and they're available forevermore. So whenever a client logs in, they'll be able to go and look at their history from the inception of their account of all their previous documents. And that includes their final investment proposal, policy documents, T's and C's, as well as quarterly statements and tax certificates.
So Elliot is saying, how is Innate planning to tackle the unit trust issue? Because standard clients have an option to get debited on the 25th, which isn't available on Innate. And so
Yeah.
maybe let's clarify whether unit trusts are in or out.
Yeah. So for tranche two and tranche three, I think Elliot's referring to the direct Stanlib unit trust business. Those are not in scope for these tranches. So this is only Stanlib platform or Stanlib Lisp client and client balances that'll be moving in tranche three. Certainly from a debit order perspective, I think there's some demand for that. We've certainly built the 1st and the 15th. And next year we'll look at giving some more options around debit orders. I know that the 25th is also quite popular. So that's a work in progress, Elliot. Hello at INN8 is a human.
Right.
Yeah, there are humans
Um,
there.
we absolutely believe in digitizing and using technology to our advantage, but we also know human beings want to talk to human beings. And so I think that's just such a fine balance and such a great balance that we've got with the INN8 platform, Mike. Certainly with the teams that you put behind ensuring that we've got the right operations available. And I know we keep you up much later than we should on this point, and you've done a great job to ensure that our advisors are seen to. So absolutely, you've got a human being that understands your issue at the
Yeah.
end of the line. Robert has said great with a smiley face, which is lovely. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of the session, Mike. Any parting words before
Yeah,
we
thank you so
close?
much for hosting as well, Famida, and for the kind attention from our advisors. I think if I was an advisor looking forward to Elevate, I can tell you two things. The one is that this is a battle-hardened team. We're about to do this for a second time. By the time we get to tranche 3, it's going to be so slick you won't even notice it. What you can do on your side is get accredited, uh, do 1 or 2 new clients on the INN8 platform so you know where to go next year, March, and then look out for all of our comms. There's lots of collateral and emails that you can have a look and read through, and then ask us questions. We're here to help. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, advisors, and thank you for your kind attention. We will certainly have a lot more of these and looking forward to engaging with you again. Mike, as always, thank you for being so free and so transparent with all of the information that we needed. And we really are looking forward to T3, and we're looking forward to an environment where we've actually just got INN8 as our local platform. And I know we're very close. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Famida. Bye.
INN8 is a registered trademark of Stanlib Wealth Management Pty Limited, an authorised financial services provider.